This one too?
Yeah, you need that one.
Okay.
And you can give that to me someplace.
Well, that's it. Turn that on. This is for the state of the one. And just hook it
Oh,
on
he's pinning her. Does that mean that no one stays?
there. Okay, you know, I like to sit down so I can read some notes if I need to. If you ask me a question that I don't know offhand, I do have notes, more than you really want to.
Try speaking and then ask them if they can hear you.
Okay, can you hear me? Can you people on the Zooms hear me?
Yes, we
Anybody
can.
else? Okay, great. That's what we want to know, then we can start. All right, am I going to show up? No, I have Beverly Weber.
All right.
No, we're going to have Beverly Weber up. Okay, I'm going to go back just one more. Let's see, previous. Okay, we are not in the right place. All right, this is where we're going to start. We're going to start with this time, and next time, you know, there will be a second one of the other two islands that we're not covering today. And if anybody has a bottle of water that I forgot to bring that they haven't opened yet, I'm probably going to need it sometime. Nobody? That may be a problem. Oh, bless you. Okay, these are the main 5 or 6 or 7 or 8, depending on what you want to count, Hawaii islands. As you see, they're way out in the middle of nowhere. Basically about even with Mexico and Guatemala, so they're pretty far south for us. About 2,000, 2,400 miles from California, so don't try to swim it. These people came from these islands down in here, mainly the Marquesas and Tahiti, which is even farther. And not until about the 1200s, though there was some evidence of people being there before that. So this is my main first trip to Hawaii in 2011. I didn't get there until then because I just had this vision of Hawaii being really touristy and beautiful beaches and not much else. Boy, was I surprised. So since then, I've made 3 other trips, 4 in all. And some of you may remember Teresa Wilkin, who's over here, a member of our club. She invited me to come out there. She lived in Honolulu for 10 years when she worked for the State Department. Had a condo there right down in Waikiki, lucky girl. And she also volunteered up here at the Hawaiian Volcano Research Center and still knew people there, which was very nice for us because we got to see something that most tourists didn't get to see. So she invited 2 of her friends that she knew from the State Department, Carol and Bill, and we went out in February of 2011, my first trip. And we did the 2 islands that time, the Big Island and Oahu, where and stayed at her place. So I'll tell you more about that. My second trip was with my son, James, who moved there later in 2011, December. He's still there. And I went back to see him in 2014 and again in 2015. And our 4th trip was with my daughter, Beth, who invited me to Kauai with her family, who are these 2 folks, and James with his daughter. So these are the 4 trips that I made. They're not going to necessarily be in that order. Thank you so much. You're a lifesaver. There I go. All right. How did that come up? Let me clip it to this. Yeah, as you know, my voice gives out, so I'm really helpful. I just forgot all about this. Okay, so we're going to start with the Big Island, which is this one. And in fact, it is the biggest of the islands because I'm going to tell you a little bit about volcanoes and where they came from and where they're going. Next is the island of Maui, and we'll do the other 2, as I said, in June. They would be Oahu and Kauai. So the Big Island is named that way for a reason. It is the biggest of the islands. The name of it actually is Hawaii, but most people say, well, why are you calling it Hawaii when all the islands are called Hawaii? So we kind of nicknamed it Big Island, and it's bigger than all the other islands put together. And it's still active, an active volcano. In fact, it has 2 active volcanoes in it as we speak. And it's the farthest south. As you see, the little arrow is pointing to the one that has been erupting, Kilauea, and where the National Volcano National Park is. And here we are in front of the observatory. As I said, the observatory is not the visitor center. It is where the Geological Survey measures what's going on with the volcano. So they can tell when it's going to erupt and where, and give some people heads up on it. Where you can visit is at 2 different visitor centers. The Jagger Visitor Center is right over the caldera, which is this big area right here. And as you see in 2011, it was smoking. These are from that era. And if you look down into this little part of it, it's not the whole caldera, but this little lava lake. It was reaching down about 700 feet at this point. It's molten lava. You do not want to fall in that. This was on the wall and showed a little bit about the geographics of the Big Island. And these are the two largest islands in the world. This one, Mauna Loa, being the largest. I'll talk about that more in a minute. And Kilauea being this little tiny one. These 2 are already dormant. This is Mauna Kea.
The children are
actually the
right here in the
tallest one.
queue.
And Mauna Loa is the biggest one. So these are the 2 largest islands, as I said, Mauna Loa and Mauna Kea back here. And then people ask me sometime, well, did it ever snow in Hawaii? I did not take this picture, but yes, it does snow. These mountains are over 13,000 feet, so they do get snow in the wintertime. So I grabbed this picture from someone else who did take a picture of the snow. So Mauna Loa, as we said, is over 13,000 feet above sea level, which is this line right here. But since it's out on the plate, one of the tectonic plates, it is actually coming up from sea level. If you think about Mount Rainier coming up from sea level, it just looms over the city of Seattle. If you've been out there, you know what that looks like. But coming up from the bottom of the ocean, it's much farther. This is Mount Rainier. This is Mount Fuji, again, coming up from sea level. And this is Mauna Loa. So if it starts from sea level, it's actually 56,000 feet above sea level. It's the largest volcano in the world. There are a couple of different kinds of volcanoes, which I didn't know till I was out there. Kilauea and all these Hawaiian islands are of the shield volcano, which means that lava oozes out from it. It doesn't blow its stack like Mount St. Helens did, or Pompeii, or some of those, which we call a cinder cone. And some volcanoes also have these side vents. They're basically a cinder cone volcano, but they have these side vents, so they do both, actually. And lava dome forms a new volcano, a new mountain inside of the caldera. If you ever go to Volcano National Park in Oregon, I'm sorry, in Northern California, just north of Sacramento, you'll see there's all 4 of these volcano types within Volcano National Park. So it's an interesting place to see if you're really interested in volcanoes, and not a national park that's visited that much. So this is kind of another way to look at the Big Island with Mauna Loa and Mauna Kea. The last eruptions of Mauna Loa, when I first did this, neither of these 2 had happened. Of course, this was 2011. So in 1984, Mauna Loa erupted and flew down. You see this purplish is where the lava flowed down the mountaintop. And this is the city of Hilo. It went from about 4 miles within the city limits of Hilo down the highway. And this last time that it erupted, it flowed out this way. So where do these volcanoes come from? Why are they out there in the middle of nowhere? Well, this tectonic plate that I said is moving to the northwest towards Japan. And you see these mountains. These are the ones we're talking about right here. And you see a hot spot down from the magma that's coming up and forming these volcanoes that erupt or that ooze out. And as they get older, they are moving along that plate and look at the sea level here. They're either going underwater or they may end up being just little rocks here and there. So there's actually this whole string of islands that goes all the way up towards Japan. And some of them are still active. We see these still active. Some are dormant and some are really just disappearing. And in fact, there's a new one forming off the southern coast of the Big Island. So these are these hot spots. They're coming up in the tectonic plate and they're moving northwest. So this is what the ones that we call Hawaii now. And none of these are occupied, but look how many of them are. A lot of them are underwater. You see little pieces that are above water. And I was saying that within the caldera, there's this lava lake, and that's what this looks like. It's just molten lava that comes up from the Earth's magma. And when I was there, talked about it in 2018, it was over 700 feet deep. This is, it has a little name of its own, and just bear with me on pronunciation of Hawaiian names. Luann can relate to that. She has children there too. So Halea'uma'u crater. So this is a crater. There are other craters around that may be oozing some lava as well. So that lava over 2,000 degrees. And this is what it looked like when I was there. This is the overlook that is where the observatory is, or the geological survey. This is 3 people standing on the side of it. There is a ring road around this whole caldera at the top, which they've had to close because of some of the lava flow. But it gives you an idea of how big that is, and that's the one you don't want to fall into. So this is what it looked like when we were there, just this one part of it that was smoking. And at night, they shut all those lights off around those buildings, and it's pitch black. You can imagine out in the middle of the ocean where there's nothing. So the Hawaiians, of course, called it Pele, the Hawaiian volcano goddess. But at night, you can see the lights from not from any light, but from the volcano itself, from the lava. At the geological survey, we did meet some of the people there, friends of Teresa's, and you see the kind of equipment that they're looking at. They're measuring volcanic action. And this would be normal because it is still, as you see, it's still bubbling up and still having smoke come out of it. But here we can see it's really going to town. So this is the volcano, the caldera is this area up on top. It's about 2,000 feet down into here. And it makes islands as it makes makes the ash accumulate into more islands. Here are some of these other little lava lakes. So this is the one that was active in 2018, and again, along with some of these others in our last eruption. Notice it's erupted quite a few times, so we call it an active volcano. In the last 1,000 years, this red part is lava that has flown from particularly these 2, Kilauea and Mauna Loa, and have formed most of the island. So what you see is running down here, and this south part is what's forming new land now. So this was the eruption in 2018. It's kind of a little sidebar. The eruption in 2018 is it flowed over the side and flowed into the sea, making new land. And there, as I say, there's another one out under the water that's doing the same thing, making new land underwater. So damage from Kilauea this last time, you can see that they are very dangerous because they're slow moving. You can see it coming down the highway and you can get out of the way, but it is going to cover your car and it's going to cover your house. And there isn't anything you can do about it. You don't stop volcanoes. And there are earthquakes going on up to 6 and 7 point on the Richter scale. This is what it has done to the rim road. It's added this part. This is a little enlargement of this part of the shoreline. And if you can see this little red line here, this used to be a bay. And this is all filled in now with lava from this last eruption. Yes. Yes. So yes, it's getting bigger. It is. This is the observatory on Mauna Loa. There are also some on Mauna Kea that are for celestial purposes. This one is for climate change purposes, and it's to detect changes in the Earth's climate. It measures these kinds of gases that are coming off. And if you look at this called the Keeling curve, named after Professor Keeling, you can see that the incidence of carbon dioxide, is growing as the years go by. So we can see what's happening in our atmosphere. In this last eruption of Mauna Kea, which was in just November 16th, it was a very short time that it erupted, but it erupted on the top and flowed off to the north. So it didn't really bother anything as far as housing in the rest of the island, but it did cover this road that went up to the observatory. And that goes down to the main highway, the Senator Inouye Highway. So there was a little bit of eruption here that did stop them getting up to the observatory. So the carbon monoxide gases sometimes come out this way. There are strands of glass in the air. They come out as Pele's hair. So you don't want to be swallowing this kind of air that's actually little tiny pieces of glass that would cut your throat. So it did cut off power and cut off access to the measuring equipment that they had. And there was a small amount of ash and disruption to air traffic. So this was the 22 went over into 23 eruption at Mauna Loa. So back to our normal thing. As I say, that was a little sidebar of what's been happening with the volcanoes since I went out there the first time and took these pictures. So we went to the visitor center and listened to what they had at there to talk to us. Some of you who've had children may remember the children's magazine about nature called Ranger Rick. My children watched or looked at that magazine when they were little. So this ranger was named Rick. He was Ranger Rick. And he was telling us about things the Hawaiians had. And he's got a spear that's armed or rimmed with shark's teeth. I wouldn't like to be on the receiving end of that. Some of the other kinds of things that Hawaiians had, tools and bowls and so forth. One of the other things you can see on the Big Island is the Thurston lava tube. And this is when these lava flow up to a mountain. They actually dig a hole through it or maybe make a tunnel through the forest. And when all the hot stuff flows through and it's formed a hard part around it, it makes a tube. And you can walk through those. And again, they're pitch black. You can also do nature walk and find out what grows in these forests. And indeed, they are forests. These are really heavily dense forests. And you see Teresa and her back end going into the forest with us. Our guide here was this fellow here. You see one of the stones carved. And he's telling us about some of the things we can find in the forest, one of them being a nurse log. And when a tree rots out and falls over, it just keeps getting moisture from the rain, which is daily practically, and makes new place for new trees to grow. So they're called nurse logs. And here he's pulled up a piece of ginger. Ginger is a nice red flower on it. They're really pretty. A lot of people have them around their house. They're not native to Hawaii. I'll talk a little bit more about what's native and what's not. But they came from Indonesia, and they didn't come from the Polynesians, but they're very invasive. They love Hawaii, and they grow everywhere. They will take over the whole place. So in the national park, he's pulling up this ginger, which is very invasive there. You also see a fence along here, and it's kind of rutted out, and that's because there are wild pigs there that were left there by the Polynesians and by the Captain Cook crew. They also left chickens, and so the wild chickens and the wild hogs are still everywhere on the island. This is the state tree, the ohia tree, and these little feathery flowers are the flowering unit. And this is the state bird, the nene. Now, we didn't see any nene in the first 3 trips I was out there, but we did in the 4th trip. We had one that would come right up to our door. In fact, they would have come into the condo if we'd let them. So this is a beautiful little goose that is endangered. There are not many left. They're banded. You can see the band. This is the one I took at Kauai with a little couple. They do have little couples that stay for life. And they're just lovely little geese, I guess you say. One of the buildings out there is a Volcano Arts Center. You can see the kind of artwork that Polynesians would have had, the Hawaiians would have had. And some of these things along here, that's some very lovely stuff. And baskets that they made. And also, if you're into taking hula lessons or guitar lessons, you see the guitar chords over here, you can arrange to do that too. Okay, we're skipping over now this since we already looked at it. We're going to start with the beginning of our trip, actually. Flew into Kona. We made this drive along the south coast. There are a number of interesting things of early Polynesians along this coast to see. The black sand beaches, Kilauea, and we ended up in Hilo where we flew out. These aren't really big. I would say maybe between 50 and 100 miles. I'm not sure. Do you know, Luann, how long that is? Yeah, you can easily drive across it in a day. Yeah, yeah, yeah. If you stop, it's a different matter. So if we were there to sightsee, so I find it hard to judge. Yeah.
What's the population?
Not very big. I'm going to get to Kona and Hilo, the biggest two. They're the small towns. But this is interesting coast to stop and see, and you know, there's these volcanoes are in the middle, so that's why we have them around the edges. Have the roads around the edges, Kilauea and Hilo. So this is in Kailua, Kona. They usually call it just Kona, and you see just the road runs along the ocean. One of the big hotels there. Of course, there are flowers everywhere. Everything blooms all over. All kinds of little places like this, very kitschy little places, funky. Where the sailors used to come in Kona is one of the first places that was settled. So it's very touristy, but there are all kinds of little shops and little places where you can sit down and watch the sun go down. This faces west. You can see the sun go down and people on the beach. The very first church in Hawaii was in Kona, right here on the main highway. And it was bought there really, or the first missionaries were invited by Henry, and I'll come to his name in a minute because I don't remember his last name, but he went to Boston with some of the early people who visited there and became a Christian and invited Christian missionaries to there. And all over you'll see these historical signs, Hawaii's first church. So if you see something like that, you know it's a historical place. Right across the street from it is the governor's palace, actually a house. But the two main early buildings are right here on the main road. So this is the church I can't pronounce. And inside it has a model of the ship that the big Thaddeus that the people came over on, the early the Christian missionaries. Henry, there he is. Well, Opukahaya, I guess he is. Here he is. Not a very clear picture, I'm sorry to say. Henry didn't live very long. I think he was only 26 when he died. But he was the one who brought the missionaries to Hawaii. And as I say, right across the street is where the governor's palace was. The day I was there was a little group of people with their ukuleles playing songs on the grass. So we headed south in the car along the highway and saw some of the things, the Polynesian settlements along the highway. So this is interesting too, very much like how South America before European and the Pueblos, before European contact, the population had reached in the range of 200,000 to 1 million. That didn't last very long. They brought mainly smallpox with them, and that population diminished, like many of the Western incursions of people who were immune to a lot of that stuff. So that's what some of these little places look like along the beaches of that southern place where they would settle. And this picture on a wall shows the little huts that they would sleep in, but they mainly lived outside. This is a warm climate. People lived outside. They could make a lot of things out of these different trees with the leaves, with mats and shoes and all kinds of things. One of the other things they did was to make fish ponds. And this is very ingenious. There were a lot of them. Because the tide comes in and out every day. They take little bays or estuaries and put these little walls around them. And so when the tide came in, it would make the fish come into a fish pond. Actually, it's into this little pond right here, coming in from the ocean into the pond. And then they would just put a board across it so they couldn't get out. And they would literally just walk out there and scoop them up. So this fish gate trapped them. And there were, by 1778, there were at least 360 fish ponds, and a good way to get your protein. This is a place to stop along the way too. The bay where Captain Cook stopped. He made 3 stops here, all on his way to Australia and New Zealand, where he mapped a lot of the Southwest Pacific. And he was welcome because the people there thought that these folks were gods. I mean, they were coming in this big ship and, you know, but they were sadly mistaken because one of the sailors on the next trip got sick and died. And so they thought, well, they can't be gods. So he was welcomed at first, but then not so much. So once the crewmen died, they became enemies. So when he came back in 78, they found this out. But in 79, when he came back, Captain Cook had a broken mast on his ship and he wanted it replaced, and they greeted him by hauling rocks at him. And then they stole a small boat off of his other ship, the Discovery. So he wanted his little boat back again, but like a little lifeboat or small boat. So the Hawaiian chief was shot, and then, you know, big to-do. And Captain Cook was killed at that time. So the folks, the fellow that was killed from their party is buried here right at that cove. But Captain Cook himself was killed by the mob, and he's now buried in Kona. This was a lovely place to stop because it was like a Hawaiian village. You can see how some of the lava flow hardens. Luann?
There's a place that the Hawaiians know, they call it two-step. And it's one, for me, it's one of the most magical places. The lava comes out or settles kind of on a straight line, you know, very level. And it drops down about 2 feet at the edge next to the ocean. Making a step, and then there's another step, and the second step goes all the way down about 100 feet.
Oh, I don't know about that one.
And there have been, I have seen thinner dolphins in that bay. I can swim with them. And one time in Finland, and we've seen the large green turtles. I saw stingray, and then just regular fish and bugs.
Yeah.
But it is a marvelous place.
Yeah, that's one we missed. If you on Zoom didn't hear what Luann is saying, there's another place just along that road where the lava makes a little step and then another step down that's great for snorkeling, and they've swum in there and had some of the sea creatures along with them. So this is what happens to the lava when it hardens. It's a little hard to walk on, but it's kind of porous. But it isn't hot. Somebody asked me that, and one time, is it hot? No, not anymore. It's been there a while. So these are just some pictures in the walls along there. This slide shows you where the Marquesas and Tahiti are and where they went to. And it's amazing to me that they could take boats that far and not having any idea what was out in that ocean, never having been there before. So along at this national park, there's some of the things that they would have brought. They were in boats like this, very small. Here's an artist's rendering of that. So they had sails, but they brought plants with them. The islands were so far from anything, they didn't have any vegetation on them to begin with. And so everything that you see where we say it's native to those islands, nothing's really native. When we say it's native, it's what the Polynesians brought. Now, later people also came when they started raising sugarcane and pineapple, and workers came from other places like Indonesia, Japan, China, many places, and they brought things too. But when we say there's some of the early plants that were brought, they were brought by the Polynesians. So fish nets to dry fish. This would have been the king's house out on this point. This is where I saw a lot of sea turtles back in here. I couldn't get any to come up for me. These are some of the carvings. This is the god Ku, and the plural of that is Ki, E. But some beautiful carvings of wood, usually from the koa tree, which is the hardest tree. There's a similar one in New Zealand, that these tall trees. And they had a board game that they played kind of like chess. We're not sure exactly how it was played because nobody knows anymore how to play it. The early Hawaiians would play it. Here's my only picture of my sea turtle. He wouldn't get his head out of the water though. But they're about 2 or 3 feet across. They're really big. Looks like they're rethatching these. These houses would have thatching on them. So we're moving down along the coast, as I said, along the black sand, and there is a small road that goes out there to the beach. So moving on now to Hilo, I was going to tell you the populations of these. I believe Hilo was, well, I got that on the slide, but Kona I think is about 12,000 population. Hilo's a little bit bigger, 43. But they're both small towns. It's still very pretty, and look at all the vegetation, even right in town. This is right in town. Lots of vegetables they grow. Everything grows. I was especially struck with this because, you know, I'm a flower person, like all the plants. But these are ginger and helicona flowers, 3 bunches for $5. These are these exotic flowers that we buy at the florist for lots of money. So we have some of the ginger that I was talking about, helicona. Some of the other that are made up into flower arrangements. These are tea leaves, T-I. The red are the anthurium, mother-in-law's tongue. These are orchids. And these, you can't see that one. I think these were $5. So they were just in the farmer's market. There's several early churches. And I wanted to say a little bit about the David Sarah Lyman Mission House. He was some of the early missionaries. Use some of that old wood house. It's that native koa tree from the koa trees and ohia trees on the historic places. They had a boarding house. They had a school there for children. And their children then, after they died, they gathered up all the things that they had collected and built this museum right next to the house. And it shows a lot about what the Lymans had collected in the way of Hawaiian culture and shells and minerals. They have, as I said, they started bringing in workers of different nationalities, including Philippines. There are a lot of Philippine people in Maui, particularly, but also Japanese and Chinese and so forth. And they would have rooms that would look like theirs back home. I just took a few of some of the Philippine rooms. This is a Anomea Bay. This little twin rocks, you know, you have to have a myth for everything, like Pele, the goddess of the volcano. Well, this is another one of their little myths, legend of the 2 twin rocks. Some of these you might want to look at later and stop it and read everything on the signs. We don't have time to do that. But they got wind of some invaders coming, and so they asked for volunteers for a boy and a girl to keep them with their good luck from coming into the bay. And this water was very rough, but anyway, they went to bed. The next day, this young woman and young man had turned themselves into rocks, and it made the weather, the ocean very rough right here to keep these invaders out of the bay. So that's the legend of the twin rocks. And as you can see, it would be hard to land up on those rocks if you're coming in there. So at the top of this is at the bottom, that little bay is at the bottom of a big canyon. And at the top of the canyon is the entrance to the tropical botanical garden. If you've seen my slides on the gardens, you know that I had some pictures from this garden. And again, it's just heavily tropical forest, tropical jungle. If you have a croton plant in your house, we have the little house plants. This is how big they grow there. Just a lily pool. And Big Island's also called the Orchid Island. And there are about 150,000 hybrid kinds of orchids. So if you like orchids, it's a great place to go. And I'm not going to show you all 150,000. Don't worry. I'd like to. just a few of them. So here are some of the kinds of ginger. There's more than one kind. This is the Tahitian ginger, of course, brought from Tahiti. The beehive ginger, this little one. The Indonesian ginger, the one that's gotten to be so rampant all over. And I thought they only came in red, but there actually is one that's blue. I had to get this off the internet. I just heard about it and didn't ever see one. A red ginger and Kahili ginger, didn't get this one, see this one either. So lots of flowers in their ponds. The anthuriums also are not only red, there are some that are kind of a pink or red and white. Chenille plant. These are some of the hanging crimson. There's a big, these grow in a big bush. You'll see it when you do the kauai. Blackbud. Lots of them that are very exotic when you try to buy them here. Ferns, poinciana. These heliconia, I like the mule's foot fern. These are pretty fern not a fern, but a rose grape that grows on a tree. Here's that green tea plant with the big wide leaf that I was telling you about. And they have all kinds of things that they make into whistles, sandals, thatch, raincoats, wallpaper, plates for food. This is a pretty cannonball tree that has these groups of flowers growing on it. And waterfalls, since it's in a canyon, of course, there are waterfalls coming down everywhere. And this tree with some of its roots above the ground. So just coming to see the plants in Hawaii is worth going. So another one of these ku, they were gods that were supposed to, as it says, give you wisdom, strength, and courage in competition from a monkey pod tree. One of the things we did, in Hilo, normal tourists would not be able to do. Teresa again had friends in Hilo, Dali and Louis. Dali was from Slovenia, and I hosted them as they were passing through on their way to Slovenia after this trip. That's a long way from Hawaii. Her ancestors were from Slovenia. But anyway, we stayed with Dali and Louis. So every Friday night, they go to Uncle Norman's, where he and his wife, who is this lady right here, and Uncle Norman, they host a potluck dinner every Friday night, and had been doing it for 35 years before we saw them. So what happens is this is a happening. He's a musician, and they invite any musicians in town to join them. There were several there that night in their carport. So this is a carport potluck in the carport every Friday night. So his wife gets out the Kahlua, and you get a little shot of Kahlua. Everybody gets their little shot, and we sing this song that's on the wall here. And I'm not sure we can see it. Oops, I thought maybe I could bring that one in. No, but I may be able to read that. It says, everybody does a toast, and it says, let's have one in the house. Oh, I can't see it all. Mr. Bartender, don't be allowed. As the rooster once said to the hen on the roof, let's have one on the house. So everybody sings this song. I don't remember the tune to it anymore. And then the evening begins. You load up your plate with food, and the music goes on. They have singers and guitarists and everybody has a good time. So moving on to Maui. Maui is also considered an active volcano. This is Haleakala. I can pronounce that one. The west coast is the coast most people, this part particularly, like to come to. The tourists is very small island compared to the big island. This is only about 22 miles across. You could fly directly into Kahului. All these islands have direct flights from Dallas. So my son lives up over here in Kahana, which is actually on Lahaina address. And Haleakala is one of the places you want to go. And also you've heard of the road to Hana. That would be this one right here. So here we see Lahaina. This is kind of bent on its side here. This is actually the west coast. And Iwa Valley is in a crater, dormant crater, Haleakala and Hana. And you see how steep it is here. Theoretically, there is a road all the way around here, but I just cannot even imagine being on that road. If anyone goes on it, I think they're taking their life in their hands. This is a little tiny volcano, which is had the craters collapsed and people go snorkeling in there. So of course, Maui is known for its beautiful sunsets. Since you're looking out to the west, this is the island of Molokai, where Father Damien had the leper colony. But all along the coast, some of it's rough and some of it is beaches. And every afternoon, it's raining somewhere. And it might be just a light rain, but all that jungle didn't come from no place. It rains just about every afternoon, just for a short time. Lots of rainbows. So if you're driving along in Maui, it would look something like this. This is where I stayed the 2 times that I was in Maui, Anapali Hotel in Kahana. Another one of the coups. Every hotel along that beach has shows in the evening. You can walk along the beach behind all these hotels. These are the plumeria flower. And if you see the young woman with the flower behind her ear, that's what this is, the plumeria. And they smell good too. A picture of Molokai. This little island out here, Kuhulaui, is owned by Hawaiians, and only Hawaiians are welcome there. It is not open to the public. There's only about 10% of the population that is still full Hawaiian. In fact, the islands of Hawaii are the most integrated, the most inclusive, the most mixed race of all the islands, of all the states in the US. So we have all these beautiful scenes in the evening. We have the hula shows and guitars and Hawaiian songs, all that stuff. So in Lahaina, the things you can do too. This is the main town where people settled, and more look like Kona, you know, of all the little bars where the whaling sailors came in. And some of these buildings, particularly ones that look like this, were from the 1800s that are considered as a historic district, Front Street. But there are lots of sailing ships that you can take out if you want to go whale watching. December to February is when they are there to have their babies in the warm water. And those same whales go up the California coast into the straits along Vancouver all the way to Alaska. Same whales. They know who they are, who each one is. So we were there during the Chinese New Year, and you see the dragon in the parade there. There are lots of shops along there, of course, for the tourists. That was my best friend. One of the art, we've seen these before. So in the 1800s, Lahaina was the capital of the Hawaiian kingdom. Originally, there was a king for every island, but they kind of got themselves together. In the courtyard of Lahaina, there is it is the courthouse, the old Lahaina courthouse, and these trees are banyan trees that put out roots all over, and it's basically one tree all over. But it's now a visitor center, and it tells you all about the arrival of the Polynesians and about what's happened since then, what kinds of things they made, what about the pineapple plantations and the arrival of the missionaries. You can find everything you wanted to know in there. The whaling ships, of course, kings and pineapple. And once they brought the sugarcane in, sugarcane harvest is a hard job. These are some of the sugarcanes left. There are not a lot of fields left in Maui. The price of land is too high, but that little road that goes across the island, that 22-mile, it is fairly flat, and they do grow some things in it. So the road to Hana is pretty well paved up to about here, and then it becomes very windy and almost not a road. But the time to go to Hana is when it's just rained, because all this water comes down from the rain, and it's not from the lava or from the volcano, it's from the waterfall. Well, the waterfalls are from the rainfall. So this is this ohia tree that's looking out of the valley. It's still a little foggy the day we went. I'm sorry, not the ohia tree, the African tulip. African tulip is a much fatter one. It's like the size of a cup. And it's lying here on the lava. But every little corner you go around, there's some crevice in the rock, and there's all kinds of waterfalls. And you see how dense the forest is. This is where Oprah's house was out this way. One of the state parks, again with this black lava rock, just almost when you get to Hana. And this is such a contrast to see these succulents that are growing out of this porous rock. These little, I wonder how they could possibly be growing in solid rock, but they do. And this bright green against black is really pretty. And one of the historical churches is here in Hana. And just looking out, very small town. I'm not sure how big it is, but there are only a few houses really. Going the other direction from Hana, we went all the way up to the tip this way. And again, there is no road along here. You can't drive all the way around the island. It looks like you can drive way up this way, but again, this volcano cuts that off. So right up here at the tip, there are these two bays that are really good for snorkeling. And there's mountains that come up next to it, so that it's a great view across here as well. And as you go into it, you have to park your car and walk down this little track or path down to the cliff, and it's just full of chickens. And the protocol is children do not chase the chickens. They are protected. I think people must come in and get the eggs, though, or there'll be a lot more chickens. Anyway, there's a big sign that tells you what you can and can't do at this, but this is my favorite. Most days, Honolulu is one of the best places to snorkel, but if the wave's big or water is brown, it's no good for snorkel. You were duly notified. Okay, this is one of the bays, and you see condos all along here. And as I say, the land is too expensive to grow stuff on it. So we're up on these high cliffs looking down on the snorkelers. And we had a little trip up to Eel Valley too. And this is the interior of that dormant volcano. And it looks like something out of a science fiction movie. I'm sorry, Luann?
That all the beaches are open.
Yeah.
They're, even if there's a hotel next to the
Right.
beach, it doesn't want
Right.
hotel.
Yeah.
It's law open every.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right to say that. I was mentioning with all those hotels along there and golf courses and stuff, that the beaches, and the same is true in Honolulu, that the beaches, you can walk along the beaches behind all those hotels. They're not owned by the hotels. And you can stop in at any of those hula shows or anything like that. Or stop and have a drink, whatever. But yes, again, very heavy vegetation, lots of waterfalls, but this is just all moss along here, and it's like you're on another planet or something. It's just very pretty. Good hiking trails back in there, and you're in the caldera of the dormant volcano. So the other thing we wanted to do is to go to sunrise at Haleakala Volcano. And we duly got up at 4:30 in the morning and drove up a winding road. And this is the best we could do for a sunrise. That's pretty pitiful. Some days I think they do have nice sunrise. That's a thing to do. And being on top of this mountain is kind of like being on Mars. It's this reddish from the iron in the volcano up here. And you can see it's smoking a little bit. That is from the volcano. And this caldera, they do have a little bit of steam still coming out of it, but it's basically dormant. Or it hasn't erupted in a long time, put it that way. But it's an interesting landscape because there's nothing growing up there. Except one thing that's interesting. This plant, the silver sword, it's the only place in the world it blooms, it grows and blooms. And it's kind of like the century plant where it blooms, or it grows for about 20 years or so. And when it gets this big flower on top, and then he's 6'3". So this flower grows on it. You see one back here that's just starting a little flower on it, the plant down here. And then it falls over. It gets so heavy it falls over and dies. Yeah, it's I think in that same family, or looks like, yeah, same principle. So we hadn't had breakfast, and on the way down, we stopped at this little place. This is called Upcountry in that area that's along that road to Haleakala. Up above the ocean, you have a nice view of the ocean. It's not quite so hot and humid. Nice place to see the view and to have a little something to eat, breakfast, whatever. So I'm just going to end with some of the beautiful shots that you see. If you're taking pictures, you can take pictures all day long, all night long. One of the surfers, some of the sea life, having a nap. Now, this picture, this is the only whale picture I got. I was not there. They're probably all gone by that time. I was there February, but I did get that off the internet. So particularly sunset, everybody's out. The whales, when the whales are there in winter, even the people who work in Lahaina will be late for work, and people say, well, where so-and-so? He's out watching the whales. But even the people that live there, I mean, they say, well, okay, you know, it's just a thing. People do it all the time. Watching the whales is for everybody, whether you live there or not. So my son's been there now since 2011. 12 years. And he's still there. I'm not sure how long he's going to stay. He said if he could afford it, he'd buy something in upcountry and stay forever. So I don't know.
Does he work?
Well, he did. You can't not work there unless you're a billionaire. Not even a millionaire, I don't think would do it. Yeah, he did work there. I'm not sure what he's doing now. He quit his job and I haven't heard him. So we're going to leave Maui and wait until next time for 2 more islands. Yeah. Thank you.
So we have about 5 or 10 minutes for questions.
Yeah.
And then
What did I miss? What did I miss?
And we have about 4
Take that out of there.
reservation over at the reef if you're interested.
Oh, there I am. But we've been out
If
of it all
anybody
day.
online has a question, unmute yourself, ask the question. Hopefully we'll be able to hear you.
I hope you heard that. Yeah.
Brought into which islands because
Well, all of them really. You know, they all were formed at least 2,000 miles from anything. So nothing even came in the wind, or there were no birds, nothing. But they brought everything.
by everything you mean.
Everything. Everything growing, living. Yeah, animals, birds, plants. They planted stuff. Yeah, the rocks were there, but there wasn't any vegetation at first.
I never understood that. You
Yeah.
imagine just building a boat
Mm.
and taking it off? Yeah. That's what the Polynesians did.
Yeah, they took off with no idea whether there was anything there. They had no idea whether there were any more islands out there or not. They did.
Amazing.
They think that there were people there that came and left in about 500. There were a couple things left there. Yeah, they may have heard about it. It was, you know, another one of those other legends. I don't know. But
Same thing with Easter Island, you know.
Yeah. Any of those islands, yeah, any of those islands. Yeah.
If anybody's really interested in history, then to read a really great book. It's Mission Hawaii.
Yes,
I'm
yeah.
rereading it right now. So
Yeah.
This just fits in so.
Yeah,
well.
it does. Yeah, I read it a long time as well.
Just about killed them all.
Mhm. Well, there's so much history to learn in the museum in Honolulu, which we'll get next time on the Bishop Museum, which is part of the Smithsonian Museum. And actually, there are about 5 or 6 museums on that property. And one of them is about where they all came from and what they brought. Just one whole museum on that. But a lot of interesting history about Hawaii. And of course, it's one of the few states, other than Texas, I think, that was its own country before it was appropriated by the U.S.
Thought it was going to be a little touristy, but it wasn't.
It was, but it was so much more than that, is what I meant. Yeah.
There are.
Yes, the biggest source of income is tourism.
I understand that the natives can't afford to live there anymore, and therefore.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
and they have been there, generations,
Mhm.
and it's just, where they.
Yeah, it's extremely expensive. You have to think of, yeah, because they're not even growing their own food anymore, pretty much. They grow a few things, but nowhere near where they need. So they're importing everything. You import a car, you import all your food. There of course is some work for people to do in the islands, other than that, mainly in tech type jobs, and particularly in Honolulu. But most of the smaller islands and smaller towns are meant for tourism.
Yes. Down at the tip of Big Island, they have gone back to growing their own.
Sure. Everything grows so well, and of
Yeah.
course, you saw they grow flowers, and you saw those trees, huge trees. But yeah, people grow stuff. You see stuff in the yards. Mhm. Anybody else? And I want to
I
say
have-
about Luann.
I have a
Luann has
question.
2 sons in Hawaii too. Oh, I'm sorry, I can't see. Barbara?
I have a question. So, I'm sure there's many different ways to visit the islands, but if one goes on a trip, and spends, a couple weeks or 10 days, how easy is it to travel between the islands? And do people usually target one island that they go to visit, or how do you do that?
Well, not as easy as I would like. I'm used to being in Vancouver with my sister, and we go out to islands all the time on ferries. They have an
Mhm.
extensive ferry system, and even out of Seattle. But Hawaii has not gotten to that point. You have to fly between islands for the most part. They do have some ferries out of Lahaina that go to Molokai and to this private island and some things like that. But mostly no ferries. So you have to fly. And I don't know if it's because of the oceans and the ocean being not as protected as it would be in the straits along Vancouver. But there are ferries everywhere. You can catch them like you catch a bus. But not so in Hawaii. And I've just wondered that myself, why they don't have ferries. But you pretty much have to fly everywhere.
Okay.
And
Thank
they're
you.
short trips. They're like a half hour, maybe, like flying to Austin or something.
Thanks for the program. You presented it wonderfully.
I'm sorry, say that again.
Thank you for the program. You presented it beautifully.
Thank you.
Marcia has a hand.
Yeah, Marcia.
I just wanted to say about 6 years ago on my last trip to Hawaii, I took the helicopter ride over the volcano, which was an amazing helicopter ride. You really got to look into the cauldron, and they went over the ocean so you could see the lava forming new land. But they also went over the uninhabited parts of the island, the huge valleys, and it was very interesting. I'm getting ready to take an 18-day cruise to Hawaii in November, and we're stopping at 2 or 3 of the islands. So hopefully I can eat on the ship and won't have to buy the food over there.
Yeah, I was fortunate in having a good guide in Teresa, because she had lived there and could take me where I needed to go. And also in Honolulu, she took me around there. She does not have a car in Honolulu. We rode the bus everywhere or walked pretty much.
Wow.
And if she needed a car, she would borrow one. But you can get around in Honolulu without one. But then when I went back in 2015, I was the guide for my son. I met him in the Big Island because he'd lived there 3 years and he hadn't been off of Maui. So I said, well, you need to do that. And I was a guide since I'd just been there with Teresa. And so we did that and met him then the next time in Honolulu. And again, I was the guide for that because I'd been there. But we also took a tour to Pearl Harbor, which I'd not done with Teresa. And I did one other tour in Kauai, a dinner tour along the west coast and the what's it called? The coast, not the Pali coast. Julia. Oh, yeah. Lucky you. Lucky them.
All they had left. We had a wonderful. There was Heather found a little lagoon, and that it had a little cave, and people were swimming around and they had a giant turtle moving out in and out of this little cave.
Mhm.
It was really a fun time.
Yeah, you really can have, Julia?
Luann, tell us about
Uh,
dolphins.
Wait, Paula, I asked Julia first. I saw Luann too. Let's start with Julia.
Hawaii, September.
Mhm.
It's only gonna be like 8 days. I'm tossing up between Maui and Hawaii. I do want to see beaches and be able to be on beaches, and it seems like some of the Kauai whole sides are very rough.
They all have beaches and they all have some rough places.
Really?
Yeah,
Both
yeah,
islands?
all of the islands. Yeah, all the islands.
Maui?
Yeah.
I was thinking Kauai, but I don't know.
Yeah.
If you've never been once, 30 years. Like that.
Yeah, yeah. It's called the Garden Island.
In Hawaii, but on the coast.
If you can hark, or-
Even though too far, but, I like flowers and hills. Flowers and woods.
Yeah, there are flowers everywhere, there are beaches everywhere. You can't go wrong. Each of the islands is different, I found out. And each of the islands is different. When I do the other two, you'll see what I'm talking about. But they're all wonderful and they all have something to offer. You really can't go wrong, whatever you choose.
Hawaii is the garden
Uh-huh.
island, and Maui is the valley island.
But you can see all the different things there are on each island. You're not confined to one thing.
And
Ever.
driving on
Driving is easy. Yeah, the roads may not be wide, what we're used to. In Kauai, the biggest road is one lane each way, and bridges because there's so many waterfalls and little rivers. And so traffic can get backed up because they're working on a bridge. And you can't pass anyone. You're going to go as slow as the slowest person on the road, ever. It will take you forever to get anywhere in Kauai because there's just one road.
Luann will talk about the dolphins.
Okay, let's go to Luann.
The spinner dolphin. And I mentioned them before, there's two-step, which is south of, Kona,
Mhm.
down by Captain Cook. But, this gets a little personal, but my son who lives there, Brian, has told both his son, Cat, and me, because I wanted to see spinner dolphins, that you had to go really early in the morning. Well, Cass didn't want to get up, and then it didn't work. So Cass and Galen and I are out there in the morning, but it's more like 10 o'clock. And Cass is about, maybe 11, and we were being very adventuresome. We were going out of ways. So the light goes down to the water, and you can see just as far as the light goes.
Mhm.
And we had gotten to a place where you couldn't see the bottom. And Cass looked over and he yelled at me. It's very easy to snorkel in calm seawater. It kind of buoys you up. And he looks over at me and he said, Grandma, I can't see. And I said, I think it's okay. But we had seen these spinner dolphins that people were talking about on the beach. And I wanted to go see them. And there were 3 people out there. And I said, those people look fine. I think it's going to be okay. So we snorkeled a little further out, and the dolphins kind of came up to where we were, and they were thin, like this, and dived down to where we couldn't see them below, where the sun goes through the water. And then a few seconds, a minute later, you would see them spiraling up. And as they reached the top of the water, they would then into the water.
Mhm.
And it was absolutely fascinating. It was very urgent. And there was a mother with a baby that was a dolphin or another dog.
Oh,
And that was all happening. Like that. So we get home and he's running and it's a volcano. So his dad was down below. The house is on it. And he's running down the driveway saying, we saw the dolphins, we saw the dolphins. And Glenn said, you couldn't have, you got out too late. And I said,
no.
we did. We
You know.
did. We did.
Mhm.
The best trip. It's all it was out to the dome where Oprah had her place.
Rhode Island.
It was a day trip, and the guys were so neat, that were doing it. And we met early in the morning, and then we went to the island, and the two younger ones got scuba diving lessons, and we were at a beach. Then we took a tour of it was so fun. It was, what do you call them, was the two pontoons. And I looked and all 6 of my grandchildren were laid out on the canvas. And I thought, this is memory making, It's so
Yeah,
fun.
yeah, everybody who goes to Hawaii has memories, I think. I've not ever heard anybody say I hated it. I don't know, it'd be hard to do. Yeah, we're gonna,
You need to have a hospital. Every island has a hospital. And people go to hospitals to get their gas.
it's expensive.
And it's also the cheapest place to buy food and beach food.
Mhm.
So, of course, you're gonna get a lot of food sometimes, but if you're gonna be there for a while, you're gonna get
Mhm. Yeah, I can add to that too. The local markets, we went to the local market in Honolulu, which I'll show you next time. That's the way Teresa would shop. She'd take the bus and everybody on the bus would have their baskets and bags. And you can buy cooked food because it's so ethnically diverse. You can get any kind of food. You can cook and you can get food for all week. So you get all your fresh produce and eggs and cooked food like you would get at a fast food place and take all that stuff home. So, and you don't really need to go to the grocery store except for toilet paper or whatever. But those are good. And the other thing about buying souvenirs, we found out that the ABC stores are good.
Yeah.
And they're like, kind of like our 7-Elevens or, they kind of have a little of everything. But they've got a lot of touristy stuff. If you're looking for t-shirts and you don't want the $39 t-shirt that says Hawaii on it, go to the ABC store and get one for $10. And they're just as nice. And you get them for all your grandchildren and everybody you know. And I've got all kinds of little bracelets and stuff that were practically nothing. So don't go to the expensive ones. Yeah, okay. Get around here. So thanks for joining us, Paul and Beverly.
Yeah.